I just wanted to give some updates on Wine and Samba. Well, roots of possible interactions between Wine and Samba to get us some things done. Um, Probably Rob is the person who should fill in on the details, but yeah, send him an email and he'll handle it like, yeah. So just short, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to explain what this CIFS workshop actually was about and the stuff we were talking about. So Rob is the guy who knows about the first 2 points actually. So remote name pipes. He spent time talking to lots of people about that. He probably knows more about the endpoint mapper discussion than I do, but I try to get together the stuff I still recalled about that. And ID mapping, authentication, and testing is more my area of interest. So about the CIFS workshop. The CIFS workshop is basically, well, it's not different to much different to what we did yesterday when we started the make test hacking. I mean, it's like, yeah, you have room full of engineers. You have all of them from different companies bring their CIFS implementations and testing the heck out of each other's implementations. And basically, it looks like a LAN party for grown-ups. I mean, lots of tables, lots of network cables, lots of guys in front of a computer, but nobody's playing a game. So why would Wine care about something like that? I mean, it's not like we do lots of CIFS. I mean, we do have a CIFS server, I was told. I think Rob tried to run SMB Torture against it, which is the Samba-based test tool, and it crashed miserably. Like,
No, the SMB torture test tests
oh,
DC, RPC stuff.
oh right, yeah. He said
So
we don't have we lack something that
I
they
tried
tried to
to
test.
connect via TCP/IP, and the SMB torture test assumes that certain interfaces are listening on there, so it assumes
Yeah.
lots of the kind of NT services are kind of on there, and so it didn't work because obviously
Yeah.
we haven't got those implemented.
Well, so, but apart from this little CIF server Wine has and nobody uses, well, the interesting thing about that is we want to get some cooperation with Samba done. There's lots of Samba developers there who know about specific parts of things. I got Rob to be there, so we had somebody from Wine there who knew what we actually need, because I can do all the talking just fine, but if it goes down to real implementations, I need to ask him anyway. So I decided I'd just tag him along and say, Rob, see, that's Steve. Go talk to Steve. Yeah, so there was there was lots of brain share going on, and I think that's a good thing. So, running off to the results. Yeah, this is. I remember we were talking about maybe getting some sort of a special network protocol for remote name pipes. We'd have to do that in the kernel, so would have to do that via our own driver or hooking into the CIFS kernel module. And Steve French didn't like that idea very much. So unless we're going to do that ourselves and try to get that accepted ourselves, it's not going to be a network protocol. But as a special file system, it actually would work. So Steve, I think, suggested to do this via, I don't know, pipe, a slash pipe subsystem, like slash proc or slash sys or something like that. I think that would work. We actually considered doing that as based on a FUSE file system, just wrapping a Samba library, because that actually should work as well. But Steve seemed quite happy to get started on that. So Rob wrote some test cases for him, so he could get some network traces, and well, we'll see if something gets out of that. I think Fuse is always an option for us. It runs on all the platforms we care about, so we might look into that if for some reason the CIFS kernel module doesn't work out. The downside of the CIFS kernel module is it won't work for Mac. So we'd have to like go to Apple and say, well, you see, Linux has that. We want that too. Yeah, well, Fuse works on a Mac. But if we do this via the CIFS kernel module, this will be Linux only. Yeah. For the endpoint mapper, I think one of the ideas was to use DCE RPC, which was, I don't know, who did we talk to about that? Oh yeah, Yelmer suggested the DCE RPC interface. Then Shera actually is kind of very much into Fuse right now, so he suggested to use a Fuse file system for that. This probably would work, but I think it's a really clumsy interface for DCE RPC. But yeah, well, the only problem we have right now with this is assuming we have multiple users run multiple copies of Wine that all want to register some classes with Samba, which will only be one point where they can register. How do we handle different users registering the same interface? So we need to come up with something to solve that. I mean, not right away. We can kind of just aim at the single user scenario first, but at some point we'll probably have to handle that one.
Can I ask a favor?
Yeah.
Can you motivate this for me? I don't fully understand what this means. User visible.
Okay, let's see. I don't have that in the slides here, but actually I have my talk for.
So effectively, what's integrating with Samba, the endpoint mapper gives us is to be able to run things like Exchange type applications. Obviously not Exchange itself, because it's obviously too integrated with Windows. But applications like Exchange, they have they register their port and the name in the endpoint mapper, and then clients connect to the endpoint mapper and say, tell me which port you're listening on, and then actually get to the service that they're on. So yeah, once we're integrated with Samba, then we can do kind of more network visible type applications. Yeah, because the port that Samba listens, the port that the endpoint mapper is on is already being listened by Samba, so we can't take that port.
And besides Exchange, is there any other well-known application that would be nice for us to?
I don't know of any useful applications. So.
Is it used by like office type application?
No, it's not
Not
used.
even for Gecko.
No, not really used.
It's really just servers.
Yeah.
So the endpoint mapper will be just a registry of services available in the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically that's what my nice little easy to understand picture right now is saying. I did those for a Linux conference where I didn't assume that anybody had any clue about what Wine was about anyway, apart from running solitaire, but that was the feedback I got. No, we actually have Wine Mine, which is also a really cool application. So the endpoint mapper is part of the service control manager, or whatever SCM is an abbreviation for. Microsoft likes those abbreviations, but they have like really long names otherwise, so nobody uses those anyway. That actually takes care of, so assuming this COM object on the big computer wants to use some component that happens to be on that one, the endpoint mapper is the thing that actually will know where to look for that. So this could be on the same box, but it could be on a network. And I think Wine handles it's on the same box case.
Yeah, that's not quite what the endpoint mapper is. That's
Okay.
the decom.
Yeah.
That's the decom part of it, and yeah, we don't implement that yet.
Yeah.
The endpoint mapper is pure RPC.
Okay.
It's not COM.
Well, COM uses that, but
Right,
just
yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I found it easier to explain using COM, but I agree. Yeah. Anyway, getting back to that one. Yes, I don't know how many applications would use that, but I think, well, I think wine is interesting for companies that have sort of their homebrewed applications that do some more fancy things, and I know that at least in the hospital where I worked, one of the MDs was kind of building all the software, and that was using some of the decom stuff. So probably in order to port that one for database, so we had a database server running some of the objects, and the clients would have other objects. So in order to make those things talk to each other for wine, we needed to have some sort of a network-based support for that. So I think lots of companies will have something similar.
Helps if you explain it as like distributed
Yeah.
because I worked for a company where we did something similar. Where we had a database backend, and we distributed the front end via COM objects on multiple Windows boxes. And so it is used a lot in high-end data processing on Windows.
Yeah, so I think there's a fair number of use cases that just nobody looks at wine right now because we don't do it. We might be seeing something if we do that. It's so ID mapping was something that came up yesterday as well. Rob started to implement some sort of security descriptors and things like that. And basically, ID mapping would be interesting if we want to have users running wine have the same SID they have in their Windows corporate network. And Samba does that really well. We don't need to have any library for that, even though somebody's currently working on an LGPL library that will take care of that. But we can use a binary for that. It's called WB info. It's not harder to use than the current approach we use for Samba binaries, so it will work. It does depend on WinBind being installed and running and set up correctly. But I mean, if you want to do some domain-based stuff, you will probably have that anyway. The question is if we want that, because lots of applications actually want to have an administrator account for installing and stuff like this. Yeah, that's probably something we need to look into. I mean, this will be easy to get just for the ID mapping part of it. Yeah, we just need some more advanced setup for testing, but I'm getting into that later. Authentication is pretty much the same thing if we want to authenticate users. So we don't want everybody to be administrator. So who are they? We could also do that against an Active Directory server or NT server, Samba server, whatever. Authentication using WinBind needs root access, or at least access to the WinBind privileged pipe, which is root by default, but you can set that to something different. But it's a privileged pipe. So far, we're working on something more fine-grained for on the Samba side of things, because it really kind of sucks to only have two levels of like unprivileged and privileged is root. This works for the stuff WinBind is used for right now, which is NSS and PAM also always runs as root anyway, so this is kind of fine right now, but if some other people like Wine would like to start using it, Samba needs more fine-grained access. But we might, I know there were some discussions about some sort of a Wine master server, so have one daemon running for Wine that takes care of, that was talked about for locking, I think. To have one central instance that.
Yeah, it's part of the CI
Yeah.
one server that could be run
Yeah.
locally as well.
Yeah, so I mean, this might be another area that could hook into that.
What would be the advantage to talk directly to WinBind instead of PAM?
It's just that if you talk to WinBind directly, you get SIDs instead of Unix IDs. So if you want to do this on user ID basis, that's fine, but Windows programs can't handle that. Yes, assuming the Linux box can do a single sign-on.
Right, I'm saying by
Yeah.
removing N from the loop and talking to Winbind directly, then in theory all Windows applications running under Wine would share the same token and you'd be able to do
Yeah.
single sign-on.
Yeah. So Winbind takes care of that one for us. We just need that to be running, but yeah, if we want to do something fancy like that, we need to expect the people to set up some more advanced stuff than we want to have them run right now. Yeah, we probably don't need that in the near future, but it's also some sort of a long-time project. Yeah, testing is the last thing we're talking about. Jelmer Vinoy gave a really nice talk about the Samba 4 test environment, mostly because Samba 3 is now starting to use that as well. So he was giving his talk for the benefit of the Samba 3 developers, but I think it's nice to use it for some of our more advanced tests, like all the SSPI stuff will depend on it. I don't know if we have lots of applications using Net API. I don't know. You probably see more of that at Codeweavers because I don't think games use that. Are there any popular, I don't know, Office applications that use that?
There's the password change API, and I think some of the other APIs are useful for implementing things like sort of the network folder and stuff.
Yeah. So that's
I was just going to say, I've seen lots of unsupported users. Users will say this application bombs because of missing functionality in this, but we usually just blow them off as unsupported.
yeah. So probably Net API is one area where we should try to get Samba to do the work for us as well, but this one's going to be a bit more tricky because the only reasonable interface we'll have for that is RPC, and there's the small issue of having, well, their ITLs work with our ITL compiler or the other way around. We need to work that out. That's probably going to be a bit interesting. But especially if we implement Net API using Samba, we need the Samba test environment set up so we can actually test this. Yeah, as I was saying, this might be interesting to test ID mapping, authentication, and well, pretty much everything I was talking about. We'll need to set up Samba test environment for that. So yeah, going with the suggestion Dan had yesterday, I'll probably look into just getting some script that will run all the needed initialization to get the Samba 4 environment set up and just run Wine test in that and see how that works. Well, that's basically was it. Dimitri approached me with some questions yesterday. So if I got you right, you were asking why we didn't just get Samba to relicense some of the libraries for us, right?
Not really libraries, but some parts of code.
Oh, you just like code we would then just pull into our own tree and
Not us, just as far as I understand, some guys have strong concerns that their code can be spread without control and not GPL license. And I asked yesterday whether it's possible to license some code under NGPL for Wine only for them, or not say LGPL, but just say that these parts of code can be used exclusively for Wine development. Some kind. No, you cannot put that in one. It's a GPL. You cannot say it's a GPL only. It's one.
yeah. So I'm not I currently don't think that we will be able to share much code. So if we want to talk to Samba, we're probably best off using RPC for most of the stuff as soon as we figured out how to do that. So basically, I think the best path to go would be for most things we need, just get our IDL compiler, cope with Samba IDL files or the other way around, and set up some IDLs.
When I talked to Trish about that a couple years ago, they had some extensions that were unique to Samba, and there was basically, he didn't really care about using Whittle. Is there any movement on their end about
I'm rather sure they're not caring about using Whittle so far, because they really like the extensions they have, and they use it like to create a Wireshark dissector for the SMB protocol and whatever. So I don't think that anything is going to change there. But what we could do is kind of just work out how to, well, either have it'll generate decent code from our IDL files we write for an interface like that, or make Whittle kind of ignore all the extensions they have and just create code. I think that's just the easiest way to get that done. I mean, RPC is pretty well designed for inter-process communication without linking. And I think that's the best we have, because that supports authentication, so we get around all this. We need to be root to access certain functions, because we can just authenticate and then go on with our life. And I think that's the easiest way to do. But code sharing, I pretty much gave up on that last year. Yeah, and I don't see any development there that is going to change much. Also, using Samba code will pull in a couple of dependencies that I don't think Alexandra would like. Like Samba is currently switching to Talloc, which is a really nice tree-based allocation library that they basically use to replace malloc calls and stuff like that, and it's really nice. But what? Yeah. It's really a good help to stop leaking lots of memory and have lots of, well, complicated handling of freeing memory, because you can just, well, free the whole tree in the rest after you're done. But I talked to Alexander about that once, and he wasn't too happy about having a dependency on a library like that. I understand that. I mean, Wine has lots of dependencies already, and we don't have to add more, especially if they're not shipped in lots of distributions. I think there's a Debian package for that, but I don't think there's a Fedora or SUSE package or whatever. So yeah, it would be some sort of a tricky. Yeah, but so far that's just part of the Samba code. It's not split off as well. In theory, it can be, but at Samba we've been pretty bad about kind of making that more public. I mean, it's a standalone library. It's LGPL'd. People could use it, but so far I think we're more or less the only users. So yeah. So I'm aware this was really a short rundown, but probably most of you won't be too interested in that area anyway. So any questions left? Anything?
Can it be used to access files that are on Samba shares but not mounted locally?
Well, in theory, we could, if our Net API would do that.
On Windows, it lets you do that.
Yeah.
And it's not through Net API, it's just through normal create file calls. So.
And you can give directly the path with passive access servers.
Yeah. But the problem is we can't do that right now. That would be something a Fuse file system would be good for. Unless Steve gets around to fix mount CIFS for a user. That used to work at some point, but I don't know, it seems to be broken right now. As long as we can mount as a user, we can just mount remote shares under .wine, because usually it's no problem to mount something on a directory you own. So at least for CIFS, because mount CIFS doesn't have to care about security locally, because it will do authentication anyway. So we can do that, mounting the stuff ourselves once we have some interface for that. So either Fuse wrapper for libsmb client or the CIFS kernel module. Yeah. If we want to have this work on a Mac, probably we'll need to do that via Fuse.
Alexander, do you have any objections to adding a dependency on Fuse, since it's become so prolific now?
I don't think it could be a dependency. You just mount. If you have the patch system, then it works.
Okay, I thought you
Yeah.
would have to link to a library or something.
Use the patch system.
Yeah. So you get you get a binary for the Fuse file system you built, and then you tell that to mount. So either the call works because it's installed. It would be an additional package we'd have to host somewhere, but it's not a dependency on Wine. So either it's there and people can use it, or it's not there and there's that. So I don't think that's too much of an issue dependency wise.
For
Yeah.
part of Samba, the install Samba,
Yeah,
you get the
probably.
Fuse for that. Okay.
Yeah, I think. Well, if we can, if I can find some other project that's interested in something like that, then I probably will be able to find something like. I don't think the GNOME and the KDE guys are too happy about using libsmb client right now because the new libsmb client will be GPL version 3. Both GTK as Qt as well are GPL v2 only, so they can't use newer Samba code. And a Fuse file system would kind of solve their problem as well. So I just need to talk to those people, and I think if there's more interest than from one project, I can probably host that on the Samba side.
But there's no SMB client for Fuse or no?
There was some implementation on whatever was there before Fuse, so that was kind of years ago, and nobody looks into that anymore. So there's currently what?
Was SMB mount before?
No, SMB mount is the old kernel module.
Right.
But that's been deprecated like for 5 or 6 years now. Doesn't stop some distributions from still shipping it, and it's completely broken, but it's been deprecated for quite a while. So I think, yeah, something to replace that, but in user space.
Yeah, that would be nice because we have some users who say, oh, I want to access the file on file server, but so we have to tell them, well, mount it yourself, then maybe make a symbolic link or use the zip file.
But I guess the question to Alexander was if we're gonna be dependent on Fuse in that we would do the mounting somehow automatically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think mount works for regular users just for Fuse, right?
Yeah, that works. And then we can just do this via path. So just like have as well as drive C, we have a network and then work group, server, whatever, and that should just work. We can translate that in something that libsmb client can cope with.
Okay, so I have a question. From a practical perspective, I think the single sign-on problem is important. How far away are we from getting that done?
Probably I'm going to pass that one to Rob. You're playing with a single sign-on option for or the used caged credentials option for NTLM auth. Does that work?
I don't know.
Okay.
So to answer your question, it depends on what part of single sign-on you mean. If you mean like authenticating against proxy servers that are using NTLM on the network and authenticating against exchange servers, that kind of thing, then that's already working, should be working by Kai's work, and we should get the credentials stored by the Samba daemon, and we should use them automatically. I haven't set up a test environment yet to work out whether it actually does work, but in theory it should work.
There's a back open for a Kerberos provider that also will kind of get that stuff working.
So we have the SSO just through NTLM right now.
Yeah, right now it's
Not through Kerberos.
no. And I think Rob has some sort of a hack that if an application requests negotiate, which is like the popular thing to request because it supposedly negotiates Kerberos on Windows, or falls back to NTLM if Kerberos is not available, we'll just kind of forward to NTLM, and so it probably works for most use cases.
Yeah, that hack's
Yeah.
only in crossover.
Okay. We, well, the thing that Wine currently does is to just not register negotiate, because that broke for some user on the Wine users list.
But okay, so because it works only through NTLM, that would be SSO only within the Windows world, but it wouldn't be across the Unix,
Well,
across Unix as well.
that depends on how you do SSO on Unix. You can do SSO on Unix using NTLM. Yeah, well, we don't have a Kerberos provider implemented so far. I think this is about like 1 month full-time work to get this tested and implemented.
The Kerberos part.
The Kerberos part, yeah. Well, there might be some issues with that. So I just don't use any application that needs single sign or that can use single sign-on. I have Outlook somewhere, but I don't use it for anything because I think it sucks. But yeah, but well, I can see that, but it's just I lack experience on running this stuff on Windows to be able to tell if it works on Wine or if it doesn't. So I mean that's probably something the code weavers people can tell as soon as it's implemented if it works or not. I mean.
Everything would be IE, right? And to get given a single sign-on, because like IE negotiate or via what's it called? As a weird acronym.
SSPI?
Not SSPI.
S channel?
No.
No. Okay.
It has a negotiation over HTTP with the server, so you can actually authenticate.
Well,
You actually get single sign-on.
that
Microsoft.
SPNego, yeah, that's
Yeah.
negotiate.
Yeah.
So the Unix, the RFC name for that is SPNego. It's called negotiate in the Microsoft world. And it's pretty much the same, just that negotiate also handles NTLM and Kerberos pretending to be SPNego. So yeah, it's pretty much the same, but not quite.
You need a PhD just to understand the acronyms.
Now, basically, SPNego is just some functionality in a GSS API, which is like the standard interface. There's a couple of RFCs defining this API to work out what encryption algorithm should actually be used. And Microsoft has the same thing, but like all the interface. So SSPI is Microsoft version of GSS API, and it's slightly different, like always. The API is different, but what goes over the network is slightly different as well. But most GSS API implementations cope with that these days. So yeah. I had this funny idea on implementing all this stuff based on GSS API, but I don't think it's really worth the whole thing. It's probably easier to just parse the negotiate packages ourselves once we have it implemented. I see Dan grinning because that's what he said right away when I went to start. Like, let's not reinvent the wheel, just use an existing API, but yeah.
I tried to look over the stuff, it's just impossible to understand where everything is.
But IE,
Like there's like 3 abstraction libraries, GSS.
yeah.
I still don't understand what the hell is going on.
explode too.
And
It's a good thing he's here.
I really don't understand. I really don't know if anybody really understands what the hell is going on. I mean, some people are on drugs and some good stuff going on there, and there's crazy shit that nobody can understand.
No, they were probably in a beer hall at Zurich.
It's really not that complicated, and they make
Yeah.
things that make really experienced people like turn away in horror without understanding.
Yes, but like I'm pretty sure that GSS API is a nice example of design by committee, and SSPI is a nice example of Microsoft implementing some pre-draft version of an RFC their own way. But Internet Explorer is able to do NTLM when SPNego is not there, assuming the server will do that. Squid can do that. Um, IIS can do that. Apache can do that. There's modules for Apache and Squid that will use the same NTLM binary Wine uses to do the whole thing.
Right. So from what I understand, for SPNego to work in IE would have to work with a local machine to authenticate the user and then negotiate with the server, which would have access to the same backend, like whatever store, and then figure out that that the user on the client is the one
Yeah.
that says he's on the server, and everything would work just then.
Yeah, so that should already work
Yeah.
for NTLM, and most servers have both NTLM, NTLM Kerberos in the name to have to negotiate. So you can use IE with NTLM for a lot of proxy servers. It's only yeah, and it's only a few servers that where the sysadmin kind of turns off NTLM support.
Which is actually a good idea if you can run Kerberos instead.
But Kerberos won't work, right?
That's right. It's not implemented yet, but
So
for most cases,
in a regular Unix environment that runs Kerberos for SSO, this won't work.
In a regular Unix environment, you'll have fun running plain Kerberos and want to have Windows clients kind of really cope with that, because Microsoft Kerberos is not quite Kerberos.
No, the Unix Kerberos should handle the Microsoft stuff right now.
Um,
The guys in Sweden.
yeah, Heimdall Kerberos does just fine, but nobody ships Heimdall. So yeah, everybody's going for MIT Kerberos, and MIT doesn't seem to care about that.
Didn't the MIT folks launch a consortium to try to get more people committing?
Well, that might be, but unless they drastically change the way they react to patches, that's just not going to happen. So Heimdall is really nice and responsive for everything, bug reports, patches, whatever. And MIT was just, they were doing their thing and that was it. So if MIT didn't need it, it wasn't going to get into the code base. And I'm not sure just getting a bigger committee of people will help with that. So yeah, in theory, if we had Heimdall, we could just let Heimdall take care of all of that. Both for Linux only, also for Wine.
Feel free to put that request in the distribution.
Yeah. Well, we'll probably look into that, but from the Samba side of things. Seems to open more doors because there's more money in that.
Yeah, because people aren't unreasonable. If people need that and the software doesn't provide it, gets replaced. So.
And I understood Samba uses Heimdall somehow for their
Samba 4 actually has the Heimdall code inside the Samba 4 tree to work around the problem of not having it available on the distribution. But that's kind of a pain to maintain. So just because one of the Heimdall guys is also in the Samba team, this works out. Because we can count on him just porting all changes over to Samba 4. But yeah, that's, well, it's a pain to do that. I mean, it's just, if you can use an external library, just do that. Okay, so anything else? Then I'll just give back to Jeremy so he can announce the next nice topic.